I remember the exact texture of that carpet against my cheek. Burgundy, thick. The kind Darnell picked out himself because he said it looked expensive. I remember thinking even then, lying at the bottom of those stairs, my right ankle screaming, two ribs grinding against each other every time I tried to breathe. I remember thinking, that man has always cared more about how things look than what they actually are. I'm Camille Renee Watkins, 38 years old, ICU nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital, Atlanta, Georgia. I have talked people back from the edge. I have looked into the eyes of someone who has given up and refused to give up on them myself. But nothing in 12 years of nursing prepared me for lying on my own floor, listening to my husband tell the paramedics calm as a man ordering coffee.
She fell. She's always been clumsy.
He wasn't panicking. He wasn't crying. He was performing. And I had let him perform for years. The next morning, I invited someone to breakfast. Not a friend. Not a shoulder to cry on. The person who was going to help me burn it all down legally. Before I go any further, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments right now because the women showing up for this story, I need to know you're here. Subscribe if you haven't. And stay with me because what happens next is something I still can't believe I lived through. But to understand that breakfast and why it mattered, you need to understand who I was before that staircase. Before I became someone Darnell never saw coming. Let me tell you who I was before any of this. I grew up in Decatur, Georgia, about 20 minutes outside Atlanta, depending on traffic, which in Atlanta means it could be 20 minutes, or it could be the rest of your natural life. My mother, Dolores, was a home health aide for 31 years. My father, Raymond, drove for MARTA until his knees gave out. They were not rich people, but they were solid people. The kind of people who paid their bills on the first of the month and showed up to everything, every school play, every church program, every moment that mattered. I became a nurse because of my mother. I watched her come home tired every single night, shoes off at the door feet, swollen, smelling like antiseptic and hard work, and she never once complained. She used to say, "Camille, baby, the greatest thing you can do with your hands is use them to help somebody." I took that literally. I went to Georgia State, graduated with my BSN in 2008, and by 30, I had my critical care certification and a permanent spot in the ICU at Grady Memorial, one of the busiest trauma centers in the entire Southeast. I loved that job with everything I had. The ICU is not a place for people who need to be comfortable. Every shift is a negotiation between life and whatever is trying to take it. You learn to read a room in seconds. You learn to stay calm when the numbers on the monitors start moving in the wrong direction. You learn that panic is a luxury nobody in that unit can afford. Those skills, the observation, the patience, the ability to keep your face neutral while your mind is working fast, I thought I had built those skills for my patients. I had no idea I was building them for myself. Outside of work, my life was full in the way that keeps you too busy to notice what's missing. I had my best friend, Janelle Cooper, who I'd known since freshman orientation at Georgia State. She was studying pre-law, then sharp as a tack and twice as quick, and now she's a paralegal at a firm in Midtown Atlanta. We had standing Sunday dinners rotating between her place and mine. I had my church family at New Birth Missionary Baptist. I had my mother calling me every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 7:15 p.m., no matter what. I was happy, or I thought I was happy. Looking back now, I think I was occupied, which is not the same thing, but it can feel like it for a long time. I met Darnell Marcus Watkins on a Sunday in March of 2014 in the fellowship hall after service. He was tall, 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of man who fills a doorway without trying. He had on a charcoal gray suit that fit him like it was made for him, specifically, which I later found out it was. He was laughing at something the pastor's wife had said, and when he laughed, the whole room seemed to tilt slightly in his direction. That sounds dramatic, but you have to understand Darnell knew how to take up space in a way that felt warm, not threatening. He had a gift for making whoever he was talking to feel like the most important person in the building. That Sunday, he turned that gift on me. He introduced himself as a financial advisor, his own firm, he said, based out of Buckhead. He asked what I did, and when I told him I CU nurse at Grady, he looked at me with something that felt genuine and said,
That takes a special kind of person. Not everyone has that in them.
not a pickup line, just recognition. I was not used to being recognized for my work by someone who had no reason to flatter me. We talked for 45 minutes in that fellowship hall. He walked me to my car. He asked if he could call me. I said yes. He called the next morning at 9 a.m., early enough to be serious, not so early as to seem desperate. That told me something about him. I just drew the wrong conclusion from it. We dated for 14 months. He was attentive in a way that felt almost cinematic. Flowers for no reason, handwritten notes left on my windshield showing up to Grady at the end of a rough shift with food from my favorite Jamaican spot on Covington Highway. He came to Sunday dinners with Janelle and charmed her within the first 20 minutes, which was not easy. Janelle has always been a skeptic by trade and by nature. He sat with my mother for 2 hours one afternoon and listened to her talk about my father who had passed 2 years earlier. And when I came back into the room, my mother's eyes were wet and she was smiling. That was the moment I thought this man is real. Janelle pulled me aside that evening after he left.
He's smooth, Camille.
Smooth isn't bad, I said.
She looked at me for a long moment. No, but it can cover a lot.
I laughed it off. I told her she'd been working too many divorce cases. She didn't laugh back. We got married in September of 2016 at new birth, 212 guests, blush and gold everything, a reception at a venue in Piedmont Park. My mother cried through the whole ceremony. I cried too. I was 30 years old and I believed with everything I had that I had built something real. We bought a house in East Atlanta, 2,400 square feet on Glenwood Avenue, 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch I had specifically requested. I planted gardenias along the front walkway. I hung my mother's photo in the hallway. I stood in that kitchen on the first morning and thought, this is it. This is the life. The first year was good, genuinely good, or at least good enough that I have to be honest and say I was not miserable. We cooked together on weekends. We drove down to Savannah for our first anniversary and walked along River Street in the October air, and he held my hand the entire time. There were real moments. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. It is easier to leave something that was never good. It is much harder to leave something that was good once because part of you keeps waiting for it to come back. But there was one thing that happened in that first month of marriage that I tucked into the back of my mind and did not examine the way I should have. Darnell suggested not demanded his voice easy and reasonable that he manage our joint finances. He was the financial advisor after all. It made sense on paper.
I do this for clients all day, baby. Let me take care of us.
He set up the joint account, gave me a debit card with a monthly limit he called an allowance, his word, and handled everything else himself. I was a grown woman with a salary and a 401k, and I handed over control of my own household finances within 30 days of my wedding. I told myself it was partnership. I told myself it was trust. I know now what it actually was. It was the first door he closed, and I handed him the key. The second year of our marriage was when I started noticing the temperature change. Not a dramatic shift. Not a moment where I woke up and thought something is wrong. It was more like, how in the ICU, sometimes a patient's numbers drift. Not crash, not alarm, just drift. A degree here. A point there. And if you're not watching closely, if you're charting something else or answering a call, you can miss it until the drift becomes a drop. That is exactly how it happened with Darnell. Slow, incremental, designed, I think, now to be invisible. He started with my clothes, not in a way that was obviously controlling. He never said, you can't wear that. He was too smart for that. It was always framed as preference, as love, as knowing me better than I knew myself. I'd come downstairs in scrubs for work, which, for the record, is a perfectly reasonable thing to wear to a hospital, and he'd look at me with this expression. Not angry, disappointed, like I had let him down somehow.
You're not wearing your hair up again, are you? I just think you could put a little more effort in, baby. You're representing us out there.
Representing us. At the ICU. At 5:45 in the morning. I started doing my hair before every shift. I told myself I was doing it for me. I was not doing it for me. Then it was Janelle. It started small, a comment here, a sigh there.
Janelle always has you out late. I don't know why you two need to talk every single day. She's never really supported our marriage, has she?
That last one landed harder than the others because it was partially constructed from truth. Janelle had expressed her reservations about Darnell once early on. He had never forgotten it. He filed it away and used it carefully over 18 months until I started second-guessing whether my best friend of 12 years actually had my best interests at heart. That is a particular kind of cruelty, taking someone's love for you and using it to cut you off from everyone else who loves you. I didn't have a name for it then. I do now. But there were still good moments. I need to be honest about that too, because this story is not simple and I think you deserve the full truth of it. Sunday mornings were still ours. We'd sit on that wraparound porch with coffee, his black mine with too much cream, and just talk. About nothing. About everything. About whether we wanted kids, about places we wanted to travel, about what we'd do when my mother got older and needed more help. In those moments, the man I had fallen in love with was still there, fully present, warm and funny and mine. Those Sunday mornings were the reason I kept explaining things away. They were the reason I kept choosing to believe. That was the trap, and it was a very well-built one. The Sunday that broke something open, not everything, just the first crack, was in October of 2019. We were at New Birth for the fall revival, the one where half of Atlanta shows up, and the fellowship hall gets so crowded, you're eating your dinner, standing up. Darnell loved these events. He was at his best in a crowd working the room, shaking hands that laugh, filling the space. I was standing with Sister Evelyn and 2 other women from the choir when Darnell came over. He put his arm around me, smiled at the group, and then in a voice that was perfectly calibrated to sound like loving concern, he said in front of 4 women, in front of our church family, in front of people who had watched us get married in that same building.
Y'all pray for my wife. She's been struggling lately. I worry about her. You know, how nurses are. They take on everybody else's pain, and then they don't know how to manage their own. I just want to make sure she's okay.
He squeezed my shoulder when he said it, like he was protecting me. Sister Evelyn looked at me with soft, pitying eyes. We'll keep you lifted, baby. I stood there and smiled. I said, I'm fine, thank you. I held that smile until my face ached. What Darnell had just done in 45 seconds in the fellowship hall of our church, in front of women who would repeat that conversation to their husbands and their friends in their prayer circles, was plant a seed. Camille is not stable. Camille is struggling. Camille needs to be managed. He was not warning them about me. He was building his alibi, brick by brick, smile by smile, in every room where people trusted him. I went to the bathroom and stood at the sink for 3 minutes with the water running. Then I dried my hands, put my lipstick back on, and walked back out. That night, I found the second thing I should have looked at harder. I was looking for our homeowner's insurance documents. We'd had a minor roof issue, and I wanted to check our coverage, and I went into the filing cabinet in Darnell's home office. He kept everything organized, color-coded, labeled. Very Darnell. But tucked behind the household folder was a manila envelope I had never seen before. Inside were statements for an account at a different bank entirely, not our joint account, not the business account he'd mentioned once. A personal account in his name, only with a balance I had to read 3 times. $81,000. I stood in that office for a long time. I put the envelope back exactly where I found it at the exact same angle, and I closed the cabinet. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, I asked him as casually as I could manage over breakfast whether we should think about increasing our savings contributions.
I'm handling it. You don't need to worry about the finances.
Same tone as always. Easy. Final. I nodded and refilled his coffee. But something had shifted. A small cold thing had settled in the center of my chest and was not moving. 2 weeks later, at a birthday dinner for one of his colleagues in Buckhead, a restaurant called Arnett's White Tablecloths, $40 entrees, I watched Darnell across the table holding court, making everyone laugh, and I thought, I'm sitting at a table with a man I do not know. Not completely. Not really. And then I thought something I had never allowed myself to think before. What else is in that cabinet? I want to tell you something about working in the ICU that most people don't know. You develop a clinical detachment that has nothing to do with not caring. It is the opposite of not caring. It is caring so much so consistently for so long that your brain builds a second layer between the feeling and the function. You learn to feel everything and show nothing because the moment you stop functioning is the moment somebody dies. That detachment is not coldness. It is discipline. It is a skill you earn over years of very hard shifts. I tell you this because what I did over the next 6 weeks was not the behavior of a woman falling apart. It was the behavior of a woman who had spent 12 years training herself to stay calm when everything around her was going wrong. I went back into that filing cabinet. Not immediately. I waited until a Sunday in November when Darnell drove up to Marietta to watch football with his college friends, a trip that reliably kept him gone from noon until well past 10. I had 6 hours. I used 4 of them. What I found in that cabinet was the beginning of an education. There were 3 separate bank accounts I had never known about. The $81,000 account I had already seen. A second one with a balance of just under $23,000. And a third that appeared to be a business operating account, but the business name on the statements, MW Capital Consulting, LLC, was not the name of the firm where Darnell worked, and when I searched it later on my phone, I found it had been registered in Georgia just 14 months after our wedding. I photographed every statement with my phone. I put everything back. I went and sat on the porch with a glass of water and stared at the gardenias I had planted and thought very carefully about what this meant. I did not cry. I made a list. 3 days later was when the iPad showed me the rest. We shared an Apple account, his idea originally, so we could share calendars. I had never thought much about it. That Tuesday evening, I was on the couch with the iPad looking up a recipe when a text notification slid across the top of the screen. The name saved in his phone was D. Washington Client. The message said, "When is she working nights again? I miss you." I sat very still. The television was on across the room, some cooking competition show, bright and loud. I read the message 4 times. Then I set the iPad face down on the cushion beside me, walked to the kitchen, and stood at the sink with both hands flat on the counter until my breathing steadied. I picked up my phone and called Janelle.
Hey,
"I need you to just listen," I said. "Don't say anything yet. Just listen." I told her about the accounts. I told her about the text message. There was a silence on her end that was somehow louder than words.
Camille,
"I know."
how long do you think?
"I don't know yet. I'm still figuring out the edges of it." Another silence.
What do you need from me right now?
That was why Janelle was my person. Not "what are you going to do?" or "I told you something was off," though she would have been entitled to say both. Just "what do you need?" "I need you to hold on to some things for me," I said. "Documents. Photos. I'll explain more later. But I need them somewhere that isn't this house."
She said.
No hesitation. When Darnell came home that night, I was in bed with the lights off. He moved around the bedroom quietly, shoes off at the door closet bathroom, and when he slid into bed beside me, I kept my breathing slow and even.
You sleep.
"Mm-hmm," I said. He kissed my shoulder and turned over. I lay there in the dark for 2 hours, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The next evening, I asked him about the text message. I kept my voice neutral clinical, the same voice I use when I'm asking a patient to rate their pain on a scale of 1 to 10. Non-accusatory, informational. "Who is D. Washington?" I said. There was a message on the iPad. He looked up from his laptop. Something crossed his face, fast, controlled, gone in under a second. Then the smile came back.
Client of mine. Denise Washington. She's going through a divorce emotional, she texts after hours sometimes. He shook his head, the picture of patient exasperation. I've told her about professional boundaries. It's a whole thing.
The message said she missed you.
Camille.
His voice shifted, not angry yet, but weighted the tone adults use with children who are asking inconvenient questions.
Are you going through my messages?
It came through on the shared iPad.
That's a client. I'm not going to have this conversation.
He went back to his laptop. Case closed, apparently. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. He looked up again, surprised, I think, that I had let it go that easily.
Okay.
He echoed, a small, satisfied smile. The smile of a man who believes he has handled something. 2 weeks later was when he said it. We had argued about money ostensibly because I had asked again about our savings and whether we could talk about increasing my access to the joint account. It escalated the way arguments with Darnell always escalated. His voice never rose, but the temperature in the room dropped by degrees until I felt like I was arguing inside a freezer. At some point, I said something about needing to feel like a partner in my own marriage. He looked at me, long, slow measuring.
You spend all day saving other people's lives. Isn't it funny you can't even save your own marriage?
The room went silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. I felt it go in, right into the center of my chest, the thing I had built my entire identity around, the work I had given my body and my years and my mother's memory to turned into a punchline, a proof of my inadequacy. In my own kitchen, by the man who was supposed to be my partner. He walked out of the kitchen before I could respond. I stood at the counter for a long time after he left. My hands were very still. My face was very still. But something inside me, something that had been bending for a long time, had reached its limit. I did not break. I made a decision. That night, after Darnell fell asleep, I took out the small notebook I had bought 3 weeks earlier at the CVS on Flat Shoals Avenue, paid cash, said nothing to no one, and I wrote down everything. The date, the time, the exact words. You spend all day saving other people's lives. Isn't it funny you can't even save your own marriage? I wrote it down in my cleanest handwriting, the way I chart in the ICU, precise, factual, time-stamped. And then I turned to the next page and kept writing, because I had 11 more entries to catch up on. And I was just getting started. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from living inside a lie you didn't create. It is not the exhaustion of a hard shift, which is physical and honest and ends when you walk out the door. It is the exhaustion of constant vigilance, of monitoring every word before it leaves your mouth, of reading every shift in his expression, of performing normalcy so consistently that you begin to lose track of what normal actually felt like. I had been doing it for months by then, and I was tired in a way that sleep could not touch. But I kept writing in that notebook. By January of 2020, I had 43 entries. Dates, times, exact words, physical descriptions of any marks. I had developed a system after every incident, however small, I would write it down within 24 hours, photograph the page, and text the photo to Janelle's personal cell. She stored everything in a folder on her work computer, password, protected, backed up to a drive she kept at her mother's house in Decatur. We never discussed it on the phone beyond a single code phrase. I'm sending you a recipe, which meant a new photo was coming. Janelle never asked me to explain the system. She just maintained it. That is the kind of friend she is. The notebook was the only thing that made me feel like I still had solid ground under my feet. Everything else was shifting. Darnell had begun showing up at Grady. Not every day, that would have been too obvious, even for him. But 2 or 3 times a week, he would appear in the parking deck at the end of my shift, leaning against the car phone in hand, casual as anything.
Thought I'd pick you up, save you the walk.
The first time I thought it was romantic. By the 4th time, I understood it for what it was. He was monitoring who I talked to when I left the building. If I came out with Dr. Osi or with any of the floor nurses, he would be friendly, charming, asking about their families. But the drive home was always quiet in a way that had teeth. And if I had stopped to talk to anyone for more than a few minutes before reaching the car, he would ask conversationally, pleasantly,
Who was that?
Always, who was that? It was in February when I heard the phone call in the garage. I had come home early, a shift swap, unexpected, and pulled into the driveway to find the garage door slightly open and the light on inside. I could hear Darnell's voice before I got out of the car. Not arguing. Not tense. The voice he used on Sunday mornings on the porch, warm, unhurried, intimate. The voice I had not heard directed at me in a very long time. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and I listened.
I know. Just a little longer, baby. I'm handling it.
A pause.
Because she doesn't know anything. She's not like that. She trusts me.
Another pause.
I said, I'm handling it, Tiffany. Stop worrying.
Tiffany. Not D. Washington client. Not a professional boundary issue. A name. A real name said in a real voice with real warmth that belonged to me. I sat in that car for 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard. I did not cry. I cataloged. The time 6:22 p.m. The duration I had been sitting there 4 minutes. The name Tiffany. The phrase, she trusts me. Past tense, I noted, as in she used to trust me and that was useful, and now I am managing the expiration of that usefulness. I went inside through the front door. By the time Darnell came in from the garage 30 seconds later, I was in the kitchen with the refrigerator open deciding what to make for dinner.
Hey, baby, you're home early, he said.
Shift swap, I said. You want chicken or pasta?
Chicken's good.
I made dinner. We ate. He talked about a client meeting. I asked follow-up questions. I loaded the dishwasher. I wrote it all down that night. It was 3 weeks after the garage that Tiffany contacted me directly. I was sitting in my car in the Grady parking deck on my lunch break when a text came through from a number I didn't recognize. No introduction. No name. Just, you need to let him go. He doesn't want to be there. He hasn't wanted to be there for 2 years. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to save you some time. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back very carefully. Who is this? 3 dots appeared. Then, someone who knows your husband a lot better than you do right now. I put my phone face down on my thigh. Outside the car, Atlanta went about its business cars, circling for spots, a food truck idling near the entrance, 2 residents in white coats walking fast across the deck. Normal Tuesday afternoon. The world had no idea. I picked the phone back up. Does he know you're texting me? He will when I tell him. I just thought woman to woman you deserve to know the truth. Woman to woman. She had the audacity to say woman to me, as if she were doing me a courtesy. As if she had not been in my marriage for 2 years, in my husband's phone under a client's name, waiting for me to be at work so she could ask when I'd be gone again. I did not respond. I screenshotted the entire conversation, texted it to Janelle with the caption, "Recipe incoming," and sat there until my lunch break ended. Then I went back inside and spent the next 6 hours keeping 3 critically ill patients alive, because that was my job, and I was not going to let Darnell Marcus Watkins take that from me too. But I want you to understand what that text from Tiffany confirmed, not just the affair, which I had already known in my bones for months, but something colder and more clarifying. She knew. She had always known I existed. She knew about our house, our marriage, our life. And she did not care. Not 1 degree. She had texted me not out of conscience, but out of impatience. She wanted him free, and she wanted it faster, and she had decided that alerting the wife was the most efficient path to that outcome. She was not a woman caught in something complicated. She was a participant, a willing, impatient, calculating participant. I filed that away too. That same week, Darnell said something to my mother. I found out from Aunt Rosie, who called me on a Thursday evening voice, careful and gentle. "Baby, I don't want to get in your business, but Dolores called me upset. Darnell told her you'd been having some emotional difficulties. Said you'd been hostile at home, that he was worried. Your mama's scared Camille." My mother. He had gone to my mother. I sat in my car in front of our house on Glenwood Avenue, and I felt the last warm thing I had been holding on to go cold. He had taken my best friend, or tried to. He had taken my sense of reality, or tried to. And now he had gone for my mother, the one person in the world whose opinion of me I could not be clinical about. I reached into my glove compartment and took out the notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down what Aunt Rosie had told me. I wrote it all down in my clean, precise handwriting. Then I picked up my phone and did something I had been thinking about for weeks. I called the Domestic Violence Resource Line. Not to report anything. Not yet. Just to talk to someone. Just to hear a voice that understood what I was describing. The woman who answered was calm and kind, and she listened to everything. At the end, she gave me a name. Detective Yolanda Briggs, Fulton County. Specialized in intimate partner cases. "She's good," the woman said. "She's patient, and she knows how to build a case." I wrote that name down at the bottom of the page. underlined it twice. I called Detective Briggs on a Monday morning in March of 2020, sitting in my car in the parking lot of a Publix on Memorial Drive engine, running heat on low. I had chosen that location deliberately, not near the house, not near Grady, not anywhere Darnell might have reason to drive past. I had learned by then to think in terms of exposure. Every conversation had a location risk. Every phone call had a visibility risk. I had started leaving my personal cell at home during sensitive calls and using a prepaid phone I kept in my locker at work tucked inside a winter coat I never wore in Atlanta weather. Darnell had taught me to think that way, actually. The irony of that is not lost on me. Detective Briggs answered on the third ring. Her voice was unhurried, even the voice of someone who had heard a great many things and had stopped being surprised by any of them, but had not stopped caring. I told her everything. It took 41 minutes. She did not interrupt except to ask clarifying questions, date specific language used, whether I had documentation, whether there were witnesses. When I finished, there was a brief silence.
Ms. Watkins, what you've described is a pattern, not isolated incidents. A pattern. That distinction matters legally, and I want you to understand it.
I have a notebook, I said. 47 entries. Photographs of every page sent off-site. Another brief silence. A different quality this time.
How long have you been documenting?
4 months.
And the financial accounts you mentioned, you have photographs of those statements.
Yes. Sent off-site as well. She was quiet for 3 seconds.
Ms. Watkins, I want to meet with you in person, not at a police precinct somewhere neutral. And I want you to know that nothing moves forward without your direction. You set the pace. You make the calls. I am here to help you build something solid, not to push you toward anything before you're ready.
I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. We met the following Wednesday at a Panera on Peachtree Road, public enough to be unremarkable, busy enough that 2 women talking over coffee attracted no attention. Detective Briggs was 51, compact and direct, with reading glasses she took on and off as she reviewed the photographs I had brought on a second phone. She went through everything methodically, making notes, asking precise questions. At the end, she looked up at me over her glasses.
This is good work. This is very good work.
I'm a nurse, I said. I document for a living. She almost smiled.
Keep going. Don't change your behavior at home. Don't let him know anything has shifted. I'm going to start looking into the financial accounts from my end. There may be more here than just the marriage.
That was the beginning of our arrangement. Every 4 weeks through Janelle, I passed a new envelope to Briggs, updated notebook photographs, any new financial documents I could access, a log of his movements and patterns. Briggs worked her end quietly. We communicated through Janelle, only never directly, never digitally, nothing that could be found on any device in that house on Glenwood Avenue. For 6 months, I lived 2 lives simultaneously, wife and investigator, patient and evidence collector. The woman who made his coffee and the woman who was methodically, carefully building the case that would end him. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, harder than any shift I have ever worked. And then on a Thursday evening in September, Darnell accelerated the timeline without knowing it. I had come home from a double shift, 16 hours, 2 critical admissions, 1 code that we pulled back from the edge by the skin of our teeth. I was the kind of tired that lives in your bones. I wanted a shower food and 8 hours of silence. What I found instead was a FedEx envelope on the kitchen counter, already opened, addressed to Darnell. I should not have looked. I was too tired to be careful. Inside was a receipt confirmation from the W Atlanta Buckhead. 2 nights. A suite. The dates were the weekend Darnell had told me he was in Charlotte for a financial conference. I had ironed his shirts for that trip. I had made sure he had enough of his blood pressure medication packed. I stood at that counter with the receipt in my hand, and something cracked open in my chest, not the cold, controlled grief I had been managing for months, but something rawer and older. Not just the betrayal of the affair, the specific, particular cruelty of the ironed shirts. The medication I had counted out. The wife's work done faithfully in service of a weekend he spent with someone else. When Darnell came home an hour later, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the receipt in front of me. He saw it the moment he walked in. His eyes went to it, then to me, and in that half second I watched him calculate, assess, decide, commit to a strategy, all in the time it takes to blink.
Camille.
W Atlanta, I said. The weekend of September 12th. You told me you were in Charlotte.
That was a client dinner. The hotel was for the client.
2 nights. A suite. I kept my voice even. Darnell. And that was when he said it. Not loudly, not in a rage. Quietly, with a deliberateness that was somehow worse than shouting.
You should be thanking me. I'm the only reason you have a life worth living.
The kitchen was very still.
I built this, he said.
Gesturing at the house, at the kitchen, at all of it.
Everything you have. Everything you are outside of that hospital. I made this possible. And you want to stand here and interrogate me?
I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about Detective Briggs. I thought about the notebook. I thought about the 112 pages I had sent to Janelle over 6 months. I thought about the 2 women in the ICU that week whose charts I had read and whose injuries I had recognized. I said nothing. He mistook my silence for defeat. He nodded once satisfied and walked past me toward the stairs. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, and I have replayed it thousands of times since. He was on the 4th step. I was still at the kitchen table. He turned back. I don't know why, maybe to add something, maybe just to see my face. And he said from those stairs with a contempt so casual it had clearly been living inside him for years.
Go ahead, tell somebody. Who do you think they're going to believe, you or me?
Then he turned back and kept walking up. I heard his footsteps cross the landing, heard the bedroom door close. I sat at that table for a long time. Then I stood up, picked up my keys, walked out to my car and drove to a gas station 4 blocks away. I sat in the parking lot and called Detective Briggs from the prepaid phone.
She answered on the 2nd ring.
It's me, I said. I think we need to move faster.
How fast? She said.
As fast as you can. There was a brief pause.
Camille, I need you to hear me very carefully. Whatever happens in that house between now and when we're ready, do not let him know you've moved. Can you do that?
Yes, I said.
Are you safe right now?
Right now, yes.
Okay. Her voice was steady. Then go back inside. Make him his coffee in the morning. Smile. Give him nothing. Can you do that?
I looked through the gas station window at the fluorescent light inside, at a teenager restocking the drink cooler, at the absolute ordinary Wednesday night normalcy of it all. I'm an ICU nurse, I said. I can do anything for a finite period of time. She almost smiled again. I could hear it.
Good, she said, because we're almost there.
What she did not tell me that night, what I would not find out until 3 days later lying at the bottom of my own staircase, was how close almost there actually was. And what Darnell did not know, walking up those stairs with his contempt and his certainty and his borrowed time, was that the woman sitting in that car in the gas station parking lot was not the woman he thought he had married. She never had been. 3 days after that phone call, Darnell shoved me down the stairs. I want to tell you exactly how it happened, because I think the details matter. I think the details are what separate the truth from the version he would have told the version where it was an accident, a misunderstanding, a woman who lost her footing on a Thursday night in September. We had argued again. About the W Atlanta receipt, which I had been foolish enough to leave on the counter. I had not put it back, had not pretended I hadn't seen it. And that failure of performance on my part had apparently been sitting with him for 3 days, fermenting into something uglier than the original confrontation. He came home that Thursday with it already in his eyes, that cold dropping temperature I had learned to read like a weather system. It started in the kitchen. It moved to the hallway. And somewhere in the hallway, when I said quietly, without raising my voice, without a single profanity, I want access to our joint account, Darnell. I am your wife, and I am entitled to see where our money is going. Something shifted in his face that I had not seen before. Not the calculated coldness. Something underneath that. Something that had run out of patience with its own performance. He put both hands on my shoulders and he shoved. I was standing at the top of the staircase. I don't know if he calculated that or if it was the geography of where the argument had traveled. I have thought about that question many times, and I have decided it does not matter. What matters is that I went down 14 steps, hit the landing railing with my right side, and came to rest at the bottom, with my ankle bent at an angle that told me immediately with clinical certainty that something had broken. I lay there and I listened to him call 911.
My wife fell down the stairs. She's clumsy sometimes. I've told her to be careful on those stairs.
Clumsy. He used the word clumsy. Standing at the top of those stairs looking down at me, and he used the word clumsy. And I thought even then, even with 2 broken ribs grinding against each other and my ankle screaming, I thought, he has just made the biggest mistake of his life. The paramedics were kind. They stabilized my ankle, monitored my breathing, asked me their questions. Darnell rode in the ambulance with me holding my hand, his face arranged in the perfect expression of a concerned husband. He answered their questions before I could.
She's been under a lot of stress. She works nights sometimes. She was probably just tired.
One of the paramedics, a young man named Terrell, glanced at me once with an expression I recognized the particular careful neutrality of someone who suspects something and cannot say so yet. I was taken to Piedmont, Atlanta. Not Grady. Grady was my hospital, my colleagues, my world. And Darnell had specifically told the paramedics.
Not Grady, she'd be embarrassed?
I understood that calculation too. At Grady, people knew me. At Grady, someone might ask different questions. What Darnell did not know was that Dr. Patricia Osei had called me twice that afternoon about a patient handoff had gotten no answer, had called Janelle out of habit, and Janelle, who had been waiting for something like this for 6 months, had driven straight to Piedmont the moment she heard. I was in the examination room waiting for X-ray results when the door opened. Not Janelle. Not a doctor.
Detective Yolanda Briggs.
She closed the door behind her. She was in plain clothes, dark jacket, reading glasses, a folder under her arm that she set on the chair beside my bed. She looked at my ankle at the way I was holding my right side, and her jaw tightened once. Then she looked at my face.
"I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm sorry we didn't get there faster."
"Is he still here?" I asked.
"In the waiting room, playing the devoted husband."
She pulled the chair close and sat down.
"Camille, I need to tell you something I should have told you 3 days ago when you called me."
She opened the folder. What was inside changed the shape of everything I thought I understood. For the past 4 months, while I had been documenting Darnell's behavior at home, Detective Briggs had been working a parallel track. The financial accounts I had photographed, the ones under MW Capital Consulting, LLC, had flagged in a separate investigation being run by the Georgia Secretary of State's office in conjunction with FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. 3 of Darnell's clients had filed complaints. The amounts involved were not small. Over 22 months, Darnell had redirected approximately $340,000 from client investment accounts into his private LLC money that existed on paper as legitimate transactions and existed in reality as his personal reserve. He was not just an abusive husband. He was a thief, a careful, credentialed, charming thief who had been stealing from people who trusted him with their retirements, their children's college funds, their futures. And I had been living in his house, ironing his shirts, making his coffee for 3 years without knowing.
"We have enough?" Detective Briggs said. "On both tracks. The financial case is far enough along that the state will move when we're ready. And tonight..."
She looked at my ankle, at my ribs.
"Tonight gives us the physical evidence for the criminal charge. Your injuries are documented. I have the paramedic report. And I have your 6 months of records."
She reached across and put her hand over mine on the bed rail.
"We are ready, Camille, but I need to know you're ready."
I looked at the ceiling of that examination room for a moment. Fluorescent light, the kind I had worked under for 12 years. The smell of antiseptic and clean linen. The distant sound of monitors and rolling carts and people doing their jobs, saving lives, keeping the machinery of survival running. "Tell me what I need to do," I said. The next morning, Darnell came to pick me up from the hospital, my ankle in a boot, my ribs wrapped, moving slowly on crutches he had thoughtfully brought from home. He helped me into the passenger seat with great tenderness. He asked if I needed anything. He stopped at a pharmacy on the way home and went inside to pick up my prescriptions while I sat in the car. While he was inside, Janelle pulled up behind us and rolled down her window.
Breakfast tomorrow. She said, your place, 9 a.m.
I nodded.
Briggs will be there, she said. And I'm bringing someone else.
Who? She looked at me steadily.
Marcus Sr. called me last night. He wants to talk.
I turned that over slowly. Marcus Watkins Sr., Darnell's father, the man who had watched his son become whatever he had become and had for years said nothing. Why now? I said.
Because I sent him the photographs, Janelle said simply. The ones from November 2021. I sent them last week. I thought it was time he saw what his silence had cost you.
Through the pharmacy window, I could see Darnell at the counter, charming the pharmacist, laughing at something she said. I watched him, and I felt something settle in my chest, like bedrock. 9 a.m., I said. I'll have coffee ready. The breakfast lasted 3 hours.
Janelle arrived first at 8:45 with a bag from the Jamaican spot on Covington Highway, the same place Darnell used to bring food to Grady when we were dating, which felt like either irony or poetry. I hadn't decided which.
Detective Briggs arrived at 9 sharp in plain clothes again, with a leather portfolio and the particular focused energy of someone who had been waiting a long time to have this specific conversation.
And Marcus Watkins Sr. arrived at 9:15, parking his Buick carefully at the curb, walking up the front path, slowly stopping for a moment when he saw the gardenias.
He was 67 years old, a retired electrician from Macon, who had moved to the Atlanta area after his wife passed to be closer to Darnell, his only child, his point of pride, the son he had worked double shifts to put through college. He was a quiet man, a careful man, the kind of man who believed that family problems stayed inside family walls, who had absorbed that belief so deeply it had calcified into something he mistook for loyalty. He sat at my kitchen table and he looked at the photographs Janelle had sent him. I watched his face while he looked at them. I am trained to read faces, pain responses, medication, effects, the specific geography of someone receiving news they cannot process quickly. What I saw on Marcus Sr.'s face moved through denial and into something older and heavier and more permanent. Grief, I think. The particular grief of a parent who has understood too late exactly what they raised. He set the photographs down. He did not look at me directly.
How long? He said.
The documented incidents go back 14 months, Briggs said. But the pattern likely started much earlier.
He was quiet for a long time. Outside, a neighbor's dog was barking at something. The refrigerator hummed. Atlanta went about its Saturday morning.
In my kitchen, he finally said. November of 21. I was there. I saw him grab her arm. He told me she'd been hysterical, that he was just trying to calm her down. He stopped. I believed him. God help me, I believed him.
Mr. Watkins, I said, I'm not asking you to carry that. I'm asking you to help me make sure it doesn't happen again. He looked at me then. His eyes were wet, but his jaw was set.
What do you need from me?
That was the morning the architecture of everything came together.
Briggs walked us through the plan in her methodical, unhurried way. The financial investigation had reached the point where the state was ready to move the $340,000 in redirected client funds, had been traced through 3 separate account transfers, and the documentation was, in her words, airtight. The criminal charge for the physical assault was being prepared in parallel, supported by the paramedic report, the hospital records, Dr. Osie's formal statement, and my 6 months of documented entries.
Janelle's attorney contact, a woman named Renata Cole, who specialized in family law and had a reputation in Atlanta legal circles for being, as Janelle put it, the kind of person you want in your corner and absolutely do not want across from you, had filed the divorce petition with a request for emergency protective order the previous afternoon.
Darnell did not know any of this, not one piece of it. He was in Buckhead that Saturday at a client golf event he had reminded me about twice that week, with the particular self-importance of a man who believes his schedule is the organizing principle of the household.
He had kissed my forehead before he left, careful of my ribs, solicitous and warm. The performance was extraordinary, even now, even after everything.
As he walked to his car, I had stood at the front window and watched him go and thought, he has no idea this is the last ordinary Saturday of his life. The plan moved in layers. Layer 1 was already in motion. Renata Cole's filing was in the system, the protective order request under review by a Fulton County judge. Layer 2 was Briggs coordinating with the state financial investigators for simultaneous action. The goal was to ensure that when Darnell was served, both tracks hit at the same time, eliminating any window to move money or destroy evidence. Layer 3 was Marcus Sr.'s agreement to provide a formal witness statement notarized about what he had seen in his kitchen in November of 2021. My role in all of it was the hardest role. I had to go home, take my pain medication, elevate my ankle, and act like nothing was different.
He came home from the golf event at 6:30, sunburned and satisfied, carrying a bottle of wine he'd won in some raffle. He made dinner actually cooked, which he did occasionally when he wanted to remind me that he was capable of generosity.
And we sat at the table and he talked about the golf course and a client who had embarrassed himself on the back nine, and I listened and asked questions and refilled his water glass.
At one point, he looked at me across the table with what appeared to be genuine affection and said, "I'm glad you're okay, baby." That fall really scared me.
That fall, I looked at him. I smiled. "I know," I said. "I know it did."
He reached across and squeezed my hand.
I let him. It was 2 days later that he showed me exactly who he was, one final time, as if the universe wanted to make absolutely certain I had no remaining ambivalence. I was on the couch with my ankle elevated, reviewing some patient charts on my laptop when he came in from work and dropped his bag on the chair with the particular heaviness of a man arriving to complain. He had spoken to his lawyer that afternoon not about the divorce filing, which he didn't yet know existed, but about a client dispute he'd mentioned before. He was irritated. He wanted an audience.
He stood in the middle of the living room and said to no one in particular, "She has nothing." A nurse with a journal. "I have a reputation in this city. If she ever tried anything, it would be over in 2 weeks.
He was talking about me, in my presence, as if I were furniture. I looked up from my laptop. "You're right," I said pleasantly. "Probably nothing to worry about."
He pointed at me not threateningly, just with the casual authority of a man who has never once questioned his own power. "Exactly. You're a smart woman, Camille. Some things are better left alone."
Then he went upstairs. I sat on that couch for a moment, my ankle throbbing, my ribs aching. I thought about Detective Briggs. I thought about Renata Cole and her filed petition. I thought about Marcus Sr.'s notarized statement sitting in a folder in Janelle's office. I thought about 112 pages of documented entries in a password-protected drive in Decatur, Georgia. Some things are better left alone. I closed my laptop. I looked out the window at the last of the evening light on Glenwood Avenue. "You're right, Darnell," I said quietly to the empty room. "They are." The petition was served to him 4 days later on a Wednesday morning at his office in Buckhead. I was at Grady when it happened, back on a modified schedule sitting at the nurse's station when my phone buzzed with a text from Renata Cole.
3 words. He's been served.
I set the phone face down on the desk. I looked at the monitors, the charts, the organized, controlled world of the ICU that I had built my life inside of. Then I went back to work. Because I still had patients who needed me. And because the best part was still coming. The hearing was on a Tuesday in November at the Fulton County Courthouse on Pryor Street, downtown Atlanta. I wore a navy dress and my mother's pearl earrings. I walked in on a cane, my ankle was healing but not healed, and Renata had suggested practically that I not leave that detail invisible. Not for theater, for accuracy. Let the court see exactly what clumsy looks like.
Renata Cole was everything Janelle had promised. 53 years old, natural hair, reading glasses on a beaded chain. A voice that carried the particular authority of someone who has spent decades being the smartest person in rooms that didn't expect her to be. She had reviewed every page of my documentation. She had spoken with Detective Briggs, with Dr. Osei, with Marcus Sr. She knew this case the way I knew my most critical patients, every number, every variable, every possible direction it could go.
Darnell arrived with his attorney, a man named Jeffrey Hale, who billed at $420 an hour and had a reputation for aggressive tactics and expensive suits. Darnell was in his charcoal gray, the same color as the suit he'd worn the day I met him, which I noticed and filed away as the kind of detail that means nothing and everything simultaneously. He looked composed, confident. He nodded at people in the hallway he recognized, shook a hand, smiled at the clerk.
Tiffany was in the gallery, third row. She had dressed carefully, understated, tasteful, the outfit of a woman who had thought about what she was wearing to this specific event. She did not look at me. I looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, and then I looked away because she was no longer the point. The hearing began.
Jeffrey Hale's opening position was aggressive and immediately personal. He characterized the divorce petition as a calculated financial attack by a wife who had grown resentful of her husband's success. He described my documentation as a manufactured narrative assembled by a woman with the medical knowledge to fabricate injury patterns. He used the word unstable twice in 4 minutes. He suggested that the emergency protective order request was an abuse of the court system designed to embarrass his client professionally. Darnell sat beside him and nodded at appropriate intervals, the picture of a wronged man enduring a painful process with dignity. Then Jeffrey Hale said, "We have a witness who will speak to Mrs. Watkins' pattern of emotional instability within the marriage. A witness with direct first-hand knowledge of the domestic situation over an extended period of time." He paused for effect. "We call Marcus Watkins Sr."
I watched Darnell's face when his father's name was called, a small, satisfied compression of his lips, the expression of a man playing what he believes is his strongest card. He turned slightly in his chair to find his father in the gallery to share the moment of certainty with the one person he had never doubted.
Marcus Sr. stood up from the second row. He was wearing his good suit dark blue, the one I had seen him wear to church. He carried a manila folder. He walked to the front of the room slowly with the deliberate pace of a man who has made a decision he knows is irrevocable and has decided to carry it with his full weight. He did not look at Darnell.
That was the first sign. Darnell's expression shifted almost imperceptibly a fraction of a degree. The satisfied compression became something slightly less certain. He looked at his father's face and found nothing readable there, and I watched him try to recalibrate in real time.
Marcus Sr. settled into the witness chair. He set his folder on the ledge in front of him. He looked at the judge. He looked at Renata. And then, only then, he looked at his son.
For 3 full seconds, the courtroom was absolutely silent. Then Marcus Sr. opened his folder and he began to speak.
My name is Marcus Eugene Watkins Sr. I am the father of the respondent. I was asked here today to speak to the character and conduct of my son within his marriage. He paused. I intend to do exactly that.
Jeffrey Hale's pen stopped moving.
On the evening of November 14th, 2021, I was present in my son's home on Glenwood Avenue. I witnessed my son grab his wife by the throat in the kitchen and push her against the refrigerator. She did not fall. She did not provoke him. She asked him a question about money and he put his hands on her. His voice did not waver. I said nothing that night because my son told me she had been hysterical and that he had been trying to calm her down. I chose to believe him. I have not had a peaceful night's sleep since.
The sound that came from Darnell's direction was not a word. It was the sound of air leaving a body involuntarily, a short, compressed sound, like something had struck him in the chest. I looked at him. The color had left his face. Not gradually, suddenly, as if someone had reached in and turned off a light. His skin went from its normal warm brown to something ashen and strange. The hand resting on the table in front of him, the hand that had pushed me down 14 stairs, began to tremble. Not slightly, visibly. His pen rolled off the table and hit the floor, and he did not move to pick it up. Jeffrey Hale leaned toward him and said something low and urgent. Darnell did not respond. He was staring at his father with an expression I had never seen on his face in 8 years. Not anger, not calculation, not performance. Something naked and unguarded and underneath everything afraid. Marcus Sr. was still speaking.
I have provided this court with a notarized statement of what I witnessed, along with photographs provided to me by Mrs. Watkins' representative, showing injuries sustained by my daughter-in-law on multiple occasions. I am providing this testimony because my silence made me complicit in harm done to a woman who deserved better, from my son, and from me.
He closed his folder. In the third row, I heard the sound of Tiffany gathering her bag. I did not turn around, but I heard her stand. I heard her heels on the marble floor moving toward the exit. Moving fast.
Renata Cole stood up. Your Honor, at this time, the petitioner would like to introduce into evidence the complete financial documentation regarding accounts held under the name MW Capital Consulting, LLC, in conjunction with materials provided by the Georgia Secretary of State's office and FINRA regarding the respondent's professional conduct.
She set a bound document on the clerk's desk, thick, organized, color-tabbed.
The petitioner would further note for the record that criminal proceedings related to the assault of November 14, 2023, are being coordinated with the Fulton County DA's office and are expected to be filed before the end of this week.
Jeffrey Hale was on his feet. Both of them were talking. The judge was speaking. The room had found its voice again after that long, breathless silence. But I was watching Darnell. His hands were flat on the table now, pressing down as if the table were the only solid thing left. Sweat had appeared at his temple. I could see it from where I sat, a thin shine under the courtroom lights. His jaw was working, but no sound was coming out. The man who had spoken to paramedics in a calm, bored voice while I lay at the bottom of our staircase could not find a single word. The judge called a recess. In the hallway during that recess, with Jeffrey Hale 20 feet away on his phone, looking like a man rapidly reassessing his afternoon, Darnell found me. He looked diminished in a way I had not anticipated, not just shaken, but smaller, as if the performance had been load-bearing, and without it, the structure had nothing left to hold it up. His eyes were red at the edges. His voice, when it came, had lost its register entirely.
Camille.
Just my name. Like a question. I looked at him.
Please.
He stopped, swallowed.
I'm sorry. I know I can't take it back, but I'm asking you. Please.
I thought about the 14 stairs. I thought about she's always been clumsy. I thought about my mother crying in Decatur because he had called her and told her I was unstable. I thought about the ironed shirts I had packed for a weekend he spent with someone else. You're not sorry, Darnell, I said. My voice was very steady. You're just sorry I didn't fall the way you wanted me to. I turned and walked back toward Renata Cole. I did not look back. Not once. 2 weeks later, Darnell Marcus Watkins was arrested at his Buckhead office on 2 counts criminal assault, causing bodily injury and financial fraud involving misappropriation of client funds. The financial firm suspended him within the hour. His professional license was placed under emergency review by FINRA that same afternoon. The joint assets were frozen pending full financial disclosure. The house on Glenwood Avenue, my gardenias, my wraparound porch, my mother's photo in the hallway was placed in the asset pool to be liquidated and divided under court supervision. And Tiffany, who had left that courtroom so fast her heels had echoed all the way down the marble corridor, did not visit him once. Not once. He had told her she was the one he wanted. He had told her she was worth it. And the moment the floor fell out from under him, she looked at what was left and made her calculation and walked away. I hope in whatever version of events he tells himself in that cell, he remembers that part most clearly. 6 months later, I woke up in a place that was entirely mine. Not just legally entirely. Every object in it chosen by me, placed by me, kept because I wanted it there, and removed because I didn't. A 1-bedroom apartment on Edgewood Avenue in Inman Park, on the 2nd floor with east-facing windows that let the morning light come in at an angle that hit the hardwood floors and turned them the color of warm honey. I had a small balcony with 2 chairs and a pot of gardenias I had replanted from cuttings I'd taken from Glenwood Avenue the week before the house went into the asset pool. I had taken very little from that house. The gardenias. My mother's photograph. My nursing certifications in their frames. My notebook, all 147 pages of it, which I will keep until I no longer need to keep it, and then I will burn it somewhere beautiful and watch the smoke go up. Everything else I left behind. Not because I couldn't take it, but because I didn't want it. There is a difference between what is legally yours and what you actually want to carry forward. I had spent enough years carrying things that were never mine to begin with. I went back to Grady on a modified schedule in December, 4 shifts a week, days only, while my ribs finished healing. The first morning I walked back onto that floor, Dr. Patricia Osey was at the nurse's station. She looked up when I came through the door. She didn't say anything. She just stood up and put her arms around me, careful of my right side, and held on for a moment. Around us, the ICU went about its business monitors, beeping carts, rolling the organized, controlled urgency of people doing the most important work in the world. I held on too. Then we both let go and went back to work because that is what you do in the ICU. You feel it and then you function. I had always known how to do that. I just finally understood that it applied to my whole life, not just the hours between 7 and 7. My mother came to see the new apartment on a Saturday in January. She stood in the living room with her hands folded in front of her, looking at the morning light on the hardwood floors, and she was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to me and said, "I owe you an apology, baby." "Mama." "No." She shook her head. "He called me. He told me things about you that I should have known better than to believe. I know my child. I have known you for 38 years. And I let a man I had known for 5 convince me there was something wrong with you." Her voice broke just slightly at the edge. "I am sorry, Camille. I am so sorry." I crossed the room and held her the way she used to hold me when I was small, and the world had been too much her hand on the back of my head, her voice low and steady. "I know, Mama. I know. It's done now." We stood there in the morning light for a long time.
Janelle came over that afternoon with champagne she had been saving for, in her words, the right occasion, and I knew it would come.
We sat on the balcony with our glasses and the Atlanta skyline in the middle distance, and we talked until the sun went down and the city lit up beneath us.
At some point, she said, "I want you to know I never once doubted you were going to come out the other side of this."
"Even in the beginning," I said.
"Especially in the beginning." She looked at me sideways. "You started a documentation system within 4 months of realizing something was wrong. You coordinated with a detective for 6 months without letting anything show. Camille, you ran a covert operation while working 12-hour ICU shifts and living inside the problem."
She shook her head.
"I was never worried about whether you'd survive it. I was just waiting for the rest of the world to catch up to what I already knew about you."
I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and uncomplicated with nothing behind it except the moment itself. I had forgotten what that felt like. The remembering of it was its own kind of gift.
Marcus Watkins Sr. called me in February on a Sunday afternoon.
He did not ask for absolution, and I respected him for that. He was too old and too honest to dress up what he had done as anything other than what it was.
He said I should have spoken sooner. Every day I didn't was a day I chose my comfort over your safety. I am not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I see it clearly and I will have to live with that.
I thought about that for a moment. "Mr. Watkins," I said, "you came forward when it counted. You sat in that courtroom and you told the truth when the truth cost you something real. That matters to me. I hope it matters to you too."
He was quiet for a moment. "It does," he said. "Thank you, Camille."
We spoke for another 20 minutes about nothing consequential, the weather, his garden, a documentary he'd been watching. It was the most ordinary conversation I had ever had with him, and somehow the most meaningful. As for Darnell, I know what happened to him because it is a matter of public record, and because Atlanta is not as large a city as it sometimes believes itself to be. He pled guilty to the financial fraud charges in February. The evidence was, as Detective Briggs had promised, airtight. 4 years in a state correctional facility, full restitution to the 3 defrauded clients, permanent revocation of his financial advisor license. The criminal assault charge resulted in an additional 18 months to be served consecutively. His attorney, the $420 an hour Jeffrey Hale, withdrew from the case 2 weeks before the plea, citing, in the language of legal filings, irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. Tiffany was not at the plea hearing. She was not at any hearing. She had, by all accounts, moved to Houston sometime in December. Darnell had told her she was the one he wanted, and she had believed him. I did not take pleasure in what became of her exactly, but I did not grieve it either. He sits somewhere tonight in a correctional facility outside Atlanta, a man who once filled every room he entered, who picked out expensive carpets and wore suits made to measure, and told me I had nothing without him. I do not think about him often, but when I do, I think about what he said on those stairs in the last moment before everything changed.
Go ahead. Tell somebody. Who do you think they're going to believe, you or me?
The answer, it turned out, was his own father. 3 federal investigators, a Fulton County judge, a jury of his peers, and every person in that courtroom who watched the color drain from his face when he understood finally that the woman he had underestimated had been 10 steps ahead of him for 6 months. That is who they believed. On a Tuesday morning in March, I walked back onto the ICU floor for my first full shift since the injury. I stood at the nurse's station and looked at the monitors and the charts and the organized, purposeful, demanding world that I had chosen at 21 years old and never once regretted. Dr. Osi put a coffee on the desk beside me without being asked. A new resident asked me a question about a patient's labs, and I answered it, and I asked 3 follow-up questions back and watched her write everything down. This is my life. This specific, demanding, meaningful, entirely mine life. My name is Camille Renee Watkins. I am 38 years old. I am a registered nurse in the ICU at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. I have 2 cracked ribs that healed stronger than they were before. I have an ankle that held me up in a Fulton County courtroom when I needed it most. And I have a life that belongs finally and completely and irrevocably to no one but me. He told me I was nothing without him. I needed him to believe that, right up until the moment I didn't need anything from him at all. To anyone listening who is keeping a notebook of your own, who is documenting, waiting, planning, surviving, I see you. Stay precise. Stay patient and trust yourself because you already know more than you think you do. The morning always comes. I promise you that. It always comes. If this story moved you, if any part of it felt familiar, if you know a woman who needed to hear this today, leave a comment below. Tell me what you took from it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your sign. There are more stories here. Stories about women who decided that surviving wasn't enough, that they deserved to actually live. I'll see you in the next one.